Greetings Game Watchers, I'm Chris Capel and welcome to the review of Champions of Anteria, the game previously known as The Settlers' Kingdoms of Anteria, a mix of strategy, village building and action RPG. There are two parts to the gameplay, a base building part set on a map of Anteria, an overhead view of your village, and missions that play like an action RPG. The village building side is probably my favourite of the two, and in all honesty I wish there was a little bit more to do there before you have to tap out into a mission. Buildings fall into three categories: housing, resources and stores. Housing is fairly standard and you need people to have any buildings. Stores are places where you can buy items for your champions, like an apothecary for potions and a blacksmith for armour and weapons. Resource gathering is based on mining the elements, which I'll get to shortly. Renown and gold received on adventures can be spent on items, making new buildings or upgrading. Rather neatly, when you upgrade your village you also upgrade your champions too. You can buy access to new buildings, new items, new abilities, and when you do this an XP bar for your settlement fills up. As your settlement gains levels you can place watchtowers to expand your domain and your champions get more powerful. It all ties together rather well and is pretty neat, and this is especially because of the aforementioned element system Blue Byte have implemented. Basically every action you take in Champions of Anteria is governed by 5 main elements: fire, metal, water, electricity and nature. Each interacts in a rock paper scissors way, being strong against one element and weak against another. For example, fire is excellent against metal but useless against water. This idea may have been blatantly ripped off from Divinity Original Sin, but it's such a good idea I'll let it slide. With building it's used particularly well, with areas that work better for certain elements, like a water gathering building getting a production boost for being next to a river. Logical, but a fire gatherer will be negatively affected if built next door to it. The village building seems simple at first, but once these elements get brought into play it actually gets quite strategic. Of course the elements also affect the action RPG side too. On the surface appears a typical action RPG, with 3 characters you can switch between and a few special powers to use. You can pause the game at any time to issue orders, but otherwise things don't feel very strategic, except that each champion and enemy is affiliated with a specific element. Anselm, for example, is based around lightning, so he gets bonus attack power against water enemies, but is helpless against nature enemies. It's this strategic aspect that elevates Champions of Anteria's action side to better heights. You really have to consider what champions and gear to bring with you on a mission to counter the enemy elements at play, and then pay attention to every battle to maximise your advantages and ease your disadvantages. It's all quite clever in theory, but sadly instead it's in the basic features of action RPGs that the game falls down. In short, it's a pain in the ass and far too frustrating. Roughly 10% of the time you'll click on a champion and nothing will happen, usually in the middle of an intense firefight, and sometimes for no reason a special attack just won't activate. Characters can't be revived and don't regenerate health, so the only way to recoup health is to stockpile health potions. Run out and you might as well quit the mission. Yes, you can pause and issue commands, but the instant you unpause, enemies will move and your choreographed assault will hit an empty spot, rendering careful tactics utterly pointless. Entire maps get repeated. In fact, I once played the exact same map and mission twice back to back. Then we have my most hated aspect of the game, the AI. Enemy AI is just stupid, but champion AI is frankly game-breaking. For starters, allies will not attack enemies for any reason other than you directly told them to do so. One of my champions was getting slaughtered and half an inch away his 2 friends just stood there watching, the sick bastards. As mentioned, champions will aim special attacks at places rather than people, and they won't think to compensate if either the enemy or they themselves move. I've ordered preemptive special attacks only to watch my character run straight past the enemies I told them to attack and fire at thin air. And the worst part of all, the pathfinding. Both enemies and champions will get lost in wide open areas and take the longest possible route to a destination, even if it means literally running around the entire map. I've clicked to attack someone and watched my champion run the opposite direction towards another pack of far tougher enemies. At one point I lost water champion Una during a big fight and she appeared a minute later with an entire army chasing her. It really is exceptionally terrible, and it means half the strategy in Champions of Anteria is learning to keep your champions on a very short leash, like the naughty dogs they are. The game also has some inexplicable performance problems. I received regular slowdown and freezing during action-packed moments to the point where I began to wonder if the game had crashed. Furthermore, I encountered plenty of bugs, including one amazingly frustrating glitch that stopped me from completing a mission. I had to escort a friendly spy to a safe spot, but the mission just wouldn't end when I reached it, and the mass of endless enemies I was fleeing from soon caught up to us. I had to reload about 4 times before I was allowed to finish. I eventually accepted the game's many problems and found myself generally enjoying it, but there are far better examples out there of action RPGs and village builders. Champions of Anteria has some undeniably neat ideas. The combination of action RPG and village building works well, and the element system adds a deep strategic slant to both action and building and makes both sides far more compelling. Unfortunately, the action side is deeply flawed. Controls aren't precise and sometimes your orders just won't be received. Plus the reliance on health potions makes the whole thing boring. It's the atrocious AI that stakes the action side in the heart though, with special attacks hitting thin air, allies that refuse to attack unless you directly order them, and pathfinding that will literally have both allies and enemies run around the entire map to get to a point an inch away, and not caring what dangers they will inevitably run into. Champions of Anteria can be a really addictive and occasionally fun game with nice ideas and a neat sense of humour, but it's just got far too many flaws to recommend. As such, I gave it a score of 6.5. Thanks for watching everyone, Chris Capel and GameWatcher, out!